Is living with intention the secret ingredient to living a full and meaningful life? Today, we'll be discussing how we can serve with greater purpose with featured professional David Baird of Endless Summer Quarterly magazine. I'm Amanda Ashley, and this is episode 92, Living with Intention. Welcome to Afternoon Cocktail. David, cheers and welcome to our show. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So, David, you're hailing to us from South Carolina, you said, just outside of Charlotte?
That's right. Yes. Just about a mile outside of Charlotte. Yeah, it's Fort Mill.
Excellent. And your birthday was yesterday, so happy birthday. Cheers to you. Was it a
Thank
good
you.
weekend?
It was great. Yes, I had the opportunity to spend quality time with my wife and my son. It was very lovely.
What's it like celebrating your birthday this year? My birthday is coming up, and I just remember a year ago how crazy things were, right? Like I
Yes,
remember,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I
So
had,
reflecting back, like I mean, how does it make you feel to come out of this year?
well, just last year, I remembered that the news of the coronavirus had already come, and they were beginning this uh, it had become present in the news cycle, and we were not sure whether or not we should go out and have dinner. And it hadn't become quite as prominent in terms of the number of cancellations of sporting events, and everything began to shut down. Things hadn't happened quite yet. In fact, I was watching a program earlier today, and it started to happen March 9th, March 10th, March 11th. So my birthday came just before everything started to shut down. And so we went out to a lovely dinner. I was able to gather with friends and my wife and my son, and it was very nice, very lovely. So this year
How
is
are
very different.
things in South Carolina? Yeah, right. I know my birthday's April 4th, so it's approaching. And I just remember last year we couldn't do anything, and things still felt very fresh. So it was kind of a crappier day out, but I was like, all I want to do is order Han Noodle, which is like this awesome Chinese food place here in Rochester. And I said I want to be with my mom, dad, my son, and Beau. And we actually drove an hour out and went to Letchworth Park, which, if you ever come to New York again, you should visit. It's beautiful. It's a state park, and we just kind of walked around and took in something beautiful and kept the cash. But this year it's interesting. It's crazy to think it's been a year. This time just like for what we've all gone through, and you've gone through a lot, especially aside from the pandemic. So I mean, it's yeah to come out on the other end of that, it kind of feels good in a way, right?
Yes, absolutely. I've kind of used the last year, the project that we'll be talking about. I kind of used it as for lack of a better term, beautiful distraction
Yeah.
because it allowed me to kind of pour my altruistic intentions into that focus as opposed to the focus of what the constant news cycle of you know what's the bad news today.
Yeah, I
Which
know.
seemed to
Feels like that.
kind of see, yeah, it kind of was overwhelming at times.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about this. So, can you tell our audience just a little bit about who you are and what you do? Tell us about Endless Quarterly Magazine.
Sure. Well, Endless Summer Quarterly began sometime back in 1987 and was run by two guys, Phil Mast and Rick Edgel, and they lived in San Diego. And one of the writers for that publication at the time was my very dear friend Lee Dempsey. And so and yeah, so they started in '87. At some point, Lee and I ran into each other at a record convention, and I was impatiently waiting for him to get out of the way so that I could get to the Beach Boy records. And we just struck up a conversation, and we hit it off. And although I lived in Charlotte and he lived in Raleigh, um, he told me about Endless Summer Quarterly magazine, and I subscribed for 1 year, and I believe that was 1990. And I just didn't feel like it offered anything. That's just my perspective. It was, and remember back then around 1990, technology was so different that it, you can't do it nowadays. You can do so much with computer graphics and everything, but back then it was kind of a cut and paste publication, and it didn't offer much in terms of historic perspective. It had articles and news, but it didn't offer much in terms of historic perspective, and it didn't give me access to the Beach Boys. And that's kind of, I think, what I was looking for. So I subscribed for 1 year, then I didn't subscribe anymore. And then in sometime in the summer of 93, Rick and Phil called Lee and said, we're not going to do this anymore. Would you like to purchase the business license? Because, and if you take the business license over, understand that that doesn't mean that you're going to get, the Beach Boys aren't going to be available to you. You're just taking over the name and you're going to be working on the magazine. So we did that. And I come from broadcast journalism. Out of high school, I went to the Professional Academy of Broadcasting in Knoxville, Tennessee, and that's how I got my broadcast degree. So I was in radio. So my perspective on whether or not we meant them was, I didn't give it any thought. I understood it, but I was very interested in the history of the group because I love history. It was my favorite subject in high school. And so the idea of exploring music history was really enchanting to me. I mean, I liked looking at recordings and how they affected history, like Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth. There are so many examples. And for a while there, I was actually into the Doors, and I grew up in New York. And when I was in New York, I grew up like all the kids on my street. We played hockey and we listened to Kiss. We were all Kiss Army members. So I went from Kiss, but Kiss is really responsible for me liking the Beach Boys, which is odd. But
Interesting.
in 1978, I believe, Kiss released Kiss Alive 2, which was 2-record set. And the first 3 sides was live concert recordings. And then the 4th side was like studio cuts that were either B-sides or leftover recordings that weren't a part of anything else. And one of the songs they covered was Dave Clark Five's Any Way You Want It. And being a 13-year-old, I had no idea who the Dave Clark Five were. We didn't have Google back then. I just thought it was a Kiss song. But I loved it. And I can remember walking down the halls in 7th grade singing the song over and over and over and thinking it was a Kiss recording.
Am I thinking of the right song? The like any way you want it. That song.
That's Journey you're thinking of.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't know
I'm.
if I would do the song justice, but it's all right, it's all right, it's all right, it's all right, any way you want it.
Okay, yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
yeah.
way it will be. Yeah, so that's Dave Clark Five, but I thought it was Kiss. And so moved to Charlotte in January of 79, and I ended up sometime in 79, I want to say early in 79, I saw the TV movie Dead Man's Curve, which is about Jan and Dean. And in that TV movie, Mike Love, Bruce Johnston, and Dick Clark make cameo appearances. And I I just fell in love with that whole genre of music right there. There's a great scene in that TV movie where the actors playing Jan and Dean walk to the beach, and Dean says to Jan, wow, this sounds so great." And Jan says something to the effect of, "Well, it sounds so great on tape." And Dean goes, "What?" He goes, "This. It would sound so great on tape." And he's referring to the surf. And then they cut immediately to them in the studio, and they're singing the Beach Boys song, "Surfing." And I just, from that day, that was it. That was kind of the song, that the moment that changed everything for me, where I
I
was just,
wondered, I wondered that. So for somebody to be like such a diehard Beach Boys fan, like I wondered there had to be like that song that just changed your life.
well,
So that was
it was
it.
that moment. It
Yeah.
was that moment. Yeah. And it was fascinating to me that there was a story about this rock and roll duo, or that were a doo-wop duo, then became a surfing rock duo, pop duo, and then one of them had this horrible accident, and then they had a comeback, after the fact. And one of them had been, had brain damage, and he could still go out and perform. He would stutter when he spoke, but he could sing. And I just thought I thought, oh my gosh. And then I just went down the rabbit hole, and I've never returned. I just went, and I bought the Jan and Dean anthology album, and I read. It came, it was this beautiful gatefold packaging that Dean himself designed, and it came with all these liner notes. And I was reading about Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys and how he co-wrote Surf City, Drag City, and I was just, well, gosh, I want to find out more about Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys if he co-wrote these songs. So then it's just, again, that's kind of that lateral movement of listening in genre. They were so similar. They sang on one another's records, and I learned when I got my, and thankfully back in those days, you could go to a record store. You could go to a used record store and really find anything that you were looking for. So I got really lucky with the timing and being able to do that, and be a music geek.
So David, so how did you bridge that gap between the artist and the fans? So you said like once you originally were subscribed to the magazine, right? And then to go from then you're like, okay, well this is lacking all these things and now you take it into your hands. How did you bridge that gap?
Well, I there's kind of two sides to that answer. The first is, if I figured, if I went in with the understanding that we weren't going to have access to the Beach Boys. That's what we were told. That's what we understood. And I don't know if it's because of my radio experience or what it was, because I'd been exposed to local celebrities. General Johnson, chairman of the board, is one example I can think of off the top of my head, that are a local beach group. And the East Coast beach music is shagging. It's not like West Coast, and it was all I knew is that, and I think this just goes back to my high school days. I knew I loved history, and I thought it was really important to whatever I was going to talk about or write about, that I did it accurately to the best of my ability.
Mhm.
And by '94 we had the opportunity to go backstage and meet them. And I just kind of utilized those opportunities to try to be as warm and as friendly as I naturally could be. In other words, and then once I got the interview opportunities, which my first interview was with Dean Torrance from Jan and Dean, sometime in the summer, August of '93, which was, I'm so glad he was my first interview because I was so nervous. My voice was shaking. I was talking to oh my gosh, this is Dean of Jan and Dean. I was so nervous, but he made it easy. And I think that lent itself to understanding that they're people too.
Yeah.
He understood immediately that I was a fanboy, and he just made it. He could tell, though, that I knew my subject matter, and that, I think, has been my MO the whole time, is knowing what I'm talking about going in.
Mhm.
And then the other main thing that I do, as I got to know them, is I would kind of lighten the mood before I do the interview, whether it be by phone or, in many occasions, sitting with them. I would tell a joke first, just kind of lighten the room, kind of bring some warmth to the whole
Conversation.
process. Otherwise,
Yeah.
oh, here comes another interview. I've done so many of these. It just kind of changes the way things can kind of unfold. And I took note in '96 of the Beatles anthology. There's a moment where the interviewer asks the three, Paul, George, and Ringo, the color of Priscilla Presley's dress when they saw Elvis and they were at Elvis's house. And I thought to myself, Boy, that's really kind of a weird question to ask the Beatles. If you have the Beatles and you're asking them about the color of Priscilla's, you're not asking them about hanging out with Elvis. You're asking about the color of her dress. And I thought that was so strange. But the answers they gave were so interesting because by the time they get to George says, "I don't remember that. I was looking for Aretha." You know, and I just thought to myself, had the interviewer said to George, doing my research, I understand that you were smoking or something like that. I don't think he would have gotten that answer. And I what I took from that was you can ask hard questions of your subjects, but if you do that, you're more than likely not going to get you're not going to allow them to have the room, and you're not going to
Uh,
allow them to open up to you. And that to me was a significant moment in my experience in interviewing them and anyone else I've had the pleasure to speak to through the years.
Yeah, it's interesting like doing these interviews, like I've learned a lot. I don't have a degree in journalism, but like I mean this has just been like a quarantine side hustle like gone right, but I mean it is interesting. I'm actually very honored and very surprised how much people open up to me. And I do really think it's asking the right questions and like I look at each of these interviews like as if I'm talking to a friend, and hopefully, and usually in the end, I do feel like I have a new friend because we've opened up to each other so much. But I think just given an opportunity to put aside the fact that no matter what you do, we're all humans at our core, right? And we all have experiences and stories that when we share them with one another, I call it like, to me, it's like soul sharing. When you do
Sure.
soul sharing, even with strangers, it just really opens up your perspective and it really helps you to learn about the mindset of different people. And that to me is spectacular. I love that. And to get that from your idols, that's got to be insane. Could only imagine.
Well, that's the other. I think this. It's an interesting word, idol, because they once one of the things that I recognized very early on in my exposure to them, even before I got into the cycle of doing interviews and getting to know them through the years, was that each one of them was so significantly different from the other that you were surely, if you talk to all of them about the same subject, just as with the Beatle example, they're each going to have a different memory. They're each going to have a different perspective. And I've come to find that I value each one of their perspectives equally. And I think
Sure.
that's one of the major things that they've come to appreciate about the way that I provide the information they give me to the fans.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. I mean, they're all different people, right? Like they share their music in common, but at the end of the day, there's, how many members? Five? Five total?
Well, yes, there are five, and at one, there have been times when there's been six. But yeah, I mean, it's an amazing, it's amazing when especially when you're talking about music, because and I experience this because I'm in my church choir. Although it's been very different from the last year because we do Zoom rehearsals, which is very unusual.
Mm.
But you're talking about a group that they come together and they combine their voices, right? And they're in the studio together and they work together and they harmonize, and then they go home or they go back on tour. And when they're touring, when they take the stage, they're harmonizing. But off the stage, they're they're just going through their individual process, just as we all do. Just that individual process, that individual, what do I have to do next? What city am I in? Where do I go? What happens when I get home? What bills do we all think about what bills do we have to pay? They have the same concerns that we all have. Now, there's certainly a different aspect to it because they've met so many interesting people in their lives. But I consider uh, I wouldn't say friends. I say this with the most sincerity. They have enough friends, so I've never set out to become their friend. That I think is kind of a fool's errand to kind
Uh-huh.
of pursue that. So I've never really pursued being their friends. Um, but I think that that's happened over time, just as again, as part of a natural course. Like you were speaking to, once you speak to somebody and you get to know them, that's just something that kind of happens.
You build a connection,
Yeah, yeah.
and that connection, whether it be business or if it started off as business, I mean, you've been working with them for a long time now. So, like, like whether or not you're best friends, you guys are connected and you've had conversations, and that matters, you know?
Well, yeah. Well, thanks. It's as important to me that they're satisfied with them spending their time and energy with me as it is that the fans who are subscribing to Endless Summer Quarterly are satisfied with the content that I'm providing to them based on the time and energy spent by the members.
Sure. Hey, so David, my friend Gary Curtis is tuned in. Hello, Gary Curtis,
Hi,
and
Gary.
thank you, thank you to our afternoon cocktail fans for tuning in with us live. Gary has a question for you, and he wants to know if East Coast Beach is related to surf rock to any degree than West Coast. He
It
says
is.
he's a big fan of surf, and he doesn't really think of the Beach Boys when he thinks of surf. I do.
I do too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, the early records were, you Surfin' USA, the song "Surfin'," "Surfin' Safari."
Mhm.
Gosh, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Look at the autographed albums. Well, there's car songs, surf songs, and beach songs, right? That's kind of the Beach Boys were kind of made up of that. But there's one really interesting link between East Coast and West Coast beach music, and that is Carl Wilson, who's unfortunately no longer with us. Carl, in I believe, '83, released his second solo album called Youngblood. On that LP was a song called What You Do to Me, which became a shagging beach hit on the East Coast. So it's very unusual that any of he's the only Beach Boy to do that. I don't think it was intentional. I just think it was one of those songs that kind of got radio play on the East Coast and just ended up on that rotation on radio stations, and it became a moderate hit. I can't quite remember how it charted, but that's that one exception. Yeah, because shagging music is the Embers, the General Johnson, chairman of the board, whereas the West Coast surf music, there's Dick Dale, if you're thinking strictly surf instrumental, but the Beach Boys did crack that genre with all those early surfing songs.
Interesting. Gary, I hope that answers your question.
I hope so.
David, so David, you were talking about, looking at the Beach Boys, like getting to see them beyond their art and to see them as human beings. I mean, getting to know their families in some light, I'm sure really helps you to see them as normal people as well, right? Even if their kids are just as extraordinary. So
Yeah,
tell
in
us
many cases, yes.
Tell us about your latest project. You just in the latest video you just put out, add some music to your day.
Well, sure. Well, as you noted, I've been doing this for a very long time. And over recent years, I've been able to do different things outside of the publication. Like in 2015, I was able to do the Beach Boys official tour program for their Summer Days and Summer Nights tour. In 2016, I was able to do the Beach Boys official tour program for their 50 Years of Good Vibrations, along with, I'll show you this real quick. I'm very proud of this because I did this with Dean Torrance from Jan and Dean.
So
So,
cool.
and Mike's wife, Jacqueline Love, and another gentleman who I never got to meet, and I don't know him, but I know he worked on part of this with Jacqueline, and his name was Patrick Wilson, no relation. But Dean Torrance designed this airbrush lettering. He did
It's a
that
beautiful
part.
cover.
And this is actually from a Robert Graham shirt that Jacqueline designed, I believe, with Patrick. That came out. It was a Good Vibrations Robert Graham shirt. I almost wore it today, but so it's just beautiful. This is all Jacqueline's art, I believe, with Patrick. And then so I got to write this, but I did it with Dean, and it ended up winning an award. And I was just it was just it's just an example of I never, going back to that first interview with Dean, never thought I would have never been able to go back in time and tell that guy that, oh, so many years down the road, you're actually going to be working on a design project with this guy. I never would
Yeah.
have foreseen that. And it's, again, these types of projects. I've asked myself, I want to say around 2006, 2007, I had somebody say to me, what else can you do with your magazine? And I thought, well, that's an interesting question. And I've thought about that question every day ever since. And it's like, what else can I do? What else can I do? So I'm always trying to find other things outside of it that still kind of are in that umbrella of the family of music and things that could be associated with them. So, I mean, I have a podcast on iTunes and Podbean and Mixcloud. It's the same as Good Vibrations, a Beach Boys program. And I take some of my interviews and put them in it and play music with it because it takes me back to my radio days, which I love. And but again, that just all led to this. And we were talking about the pandemic. We were talking about how kind of we got into this situation where we're all kind of in lockdown. And I was working on the summer 2020 edition of Endless Summer Quarterly, which was a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the group's Sunflower album. And I wish I had the album cover ready, but I don't. But I will show you the cover of the magazine. Here we go. This is it. And when I was working on this, the original album cover has the Beach Boys situated on a golfing green with their children sitting around them. And so it's Mike Love has his son Christian and his daughter Haley sitting on his lap. Carl Wilson has his son Jonah up on his shoulders. Brian Wilson has Carney Wilson sitting on his lap. And then Al Jardine is standing with his son Matt next to him. And I was working on this issue. The pandemic had come. And I was just looking at this cover and going, oh my gosh, there's so much, there's this generational level of incredible talent that I was looking at. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting and wouldn't it be cool and wouldn't it be great if I could somehow get them to record a song from this album to share with the world? And I thought, well, that's a good idea, but how do I make it even better? If I'm gonna, if they said yes, get those talents together, their time and energy, well, then I would want to use it for good. I would want to use it to benefit someone other than just the fans. So then the idea of charity came. And so I kind of reached out to everyone. And again, it's just a situation because everyone was on lockdown. It made it easier to reach out, right? Touring wasn't going on. It just made it easier to kind of text or phone calls or emails. And I was just able to reach out to everyone. And it just fell naturally into place. So the song that I chose off the Sunflower album is kind of a little known gem called Add Some Music to Your Day. And what struck me and what stood out to me in the whole process of wanting to do this was the third line of the first verse, which was, the world could come together as one. And we weren't just dealing with a pandemic, and we can kind of continue. We have cultural issues, we have political issues, and what was kind of troubling me in addition to the pandemic was kind of this separation of ability for all of mankind to have that natural gift to talk to one another. Just the ability to kind of reach across, and even if you disagree with the other person, just hear what the other person has to say. Be like-minded in knowing that even if you don't agree, it's okay to express your opinion and do it in a civil and intentional way that it's okay to not have the same opinion. And it's okay even if you don't agree with someone else's opinion, even if you feel their opinion is polarizing, it's okay. It's okay. How do we bring out the best in one another? So that's kind of the way that I think. How do we bring out the best in one another? Because I've been, even before this last year, have been kind of gun shy to the whole internet in general. The way that there are a lot of people who will post things that are just kind of very just you wonder where they come from. You wonder where the statement comes from. You wonder why they feel the way they do, because there's so much what seems to be based on what they're writing. It seems to be like anger, or seems to be agitation or frustration.
A lot of hostility out there.
Yeah, there
It's
is.
yeah.
And so I just thought, well, how do I, so that again, back to that phrase, the world could come together as one. And I really like that. And I thought, well, that's the song I'm going to go with, because there's so many vocal parts. And I thought, well, if there's anything, if I can pull this off, then that's the message I want the world to hear and experience. And if I can do it for a charity, even better. And they didn't even, there was no, there was very little hesitation. This is the amazing thing. We're talking March into April, and there was very little hesitation. I had not even landed on a charity yet. I had not even decided a charity, and everyone had said yes.
Oh wow.
So
That's
they
incredible.
just knew it before a charity. They were leaving that up to me, and they just thought, well, oh, yeah, this sounds like a pretty good, yeah. Why not? We're not going anywhere. I guess that's what the thought was. Why not? We're home. Um, but I think again, it was a situation where they all, because of the years of their experience with me, they knew that if I was going to start something, I would finish it first of all. And they also knew, and I believe they trusted and respected, that I wouldn't just finish it, but I would do it well, and that I would do it with the intention of doing it for the purpose of bringing people together, which is how I proposed the idea to everyone. I referred to that third line in the first verse as a part of my proposal to them. This is why I'm doing it. This is what I would like to do. And they all responded. And I was very lucky in respect to not just the willingness of all the participants, but Rob Bonfiglio, who's Carney Wilson's husband.
Hmm.
Bruce Johnston of the Beach Boys, he became the producer's producer, if you will. He kind of shepherded me to the door. He mentored me. He, as Dean has done for years, this is the other part of who they are that people don't get to experience, that I have to just praise them, because they're really, each and every one of them are so different, but each and every one of them have really strong, beautiful, inherent gifts that are beyond their singing ability and their performance ability and their musical talents. And so when Bruce said, okay, well, let's first of all, let's make sure it's done in the original key of E. I said, okay, okay. And then he said, and we all have to have the same track to sing to. And I was like, okay, okay. And I went to Rob Bonfiglio. Rob said yes almost right away. And the next thing I know is like a couple of weeks later. And Rob, by the way, is in Brian Wilson's touring band.
Okay.
So you're talking, and went to the Berklee School of Music. So here's it. I knew he was really great because I had heard his Trouble Again album from a couple of years ago, where he played everything and sang everything. But within a couple of weeks, he gave me the entire track, and it was so close to the original, so true to the original. I thought, oh my gosh. And then he did all the vocal parts. So he gave me all the different vocal parts. He gave me a mix to hear it all together, but I was also able to listen to each part by itself. And I think my experience in the church choir lent itself to me being able to kind of figure out how to assign this, because the Beach Boys are a vocal male group. And this project was the first time where I was bringing in female voices to be on an otherwise, what we're used to, an all-male recording. So bringing in Carney Wilson, Wendy Wilson from Wilson Phillips, Mike Love's daughters, Haley Love and Amba Love, and Mike's son, Christian, Matt Jardine, who's Al's son. Matt's also in Brian Wilson's band. and Justin Wilson, who's the late Carl Wilson's son. Yeah, I mean, so there was all this talent, and at that point, all I had to do outside of us knowing where the original members wanted to sing, where did Bruce want to sing? He just wanted to sing on his parts that he originally sang. Al started the project. He was just, I want to use the word term gung ho, but he was ready. He wanted to do this, and he recorded a lead vocal of the whole thing. So then when I sent it out to the other people to record, they had a Beach Boy lead vocal to kind of record around, to hear. And it made it really special. It made it easy. It made the process easy for them to hear that lead vocal. And from there, it just grew and it grew and it grew. And every time I had another voice, a part of, the next, like Christian and Matt were on it, then I got goosebumps. And then Wendy would send in her vocal and Haley would send in her vocal and I got goosebumps. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing because it's never been done before. The parents with the children had never been done before on a recording. Not on this level. Carney and Wendy have sung with their father. Matt has sung with Al on projects and Brian, but not where you're pulling all these people together in one place. So that it was really exciting. It was really beautiful, and the best thing that I was able to do once like for Wendy, who can sing up in that first soprano range, as Haley can too, is say to Wendy and Haley, I want you to sing the first soprano. For Carney, I said, I'd like you to sing the second alto, because that's where they're most comfortable. But I also kind of left it open-ended. If they heard a part that they wanted to sing, then the door was open for that. And it was really sweet too, because Rob and Carney's daughter, Lola Bonfilio, who's kind of she's Brian Wilson's granddaughter. She's also on the recording. So it was really sweet to be able to, that the desire was there, that they had the desire. But it was so easy for me because once I said, hey, will you sing this, 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 and this, I just got out of the way.
Yeah, it all
So,
came together.
yes,
It's awesome.
that was my role producing. But Rob really is the guy that we should acknowledge for everything. Everything. I mean, he created it. He brought it all together, and he made it sound as great as it does.
Well, David, could you play us the video? I'd love to show our audience it
Sure.
and let them experience the wonder,
Absolutely. Okay, here we
the
go.
wonder that you created. Yes.
And this is, by the way, and you'll see this as we start, this is all in support of Feeding America.
I think the audio is muted. David, I think your audio is muted. I see some familiar faces here. Dave, there you go.
So add some music to your add some music, some music, add some music, add some music, add some music, add some your deadly soul. When day is over, I close my eyes, music, my soul. And you can feel it touching your heart. Down, down, down every day in the summertime. You hear children chasing ice cream cars. The cloud in there. You must be finding new ways to add some music to your day. 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 Add some music.
Very cool, David. That's cute. I love that. Wait, where does John Stamos come from? How does he fit in all of this?
well, there was two cameos. Well, and let me just first mention that David Marks, founding member of the Beach Boys, is in there. I forgot to mention his name, and Jeffrey Foskett. They both played guitar for this, and so that again, it was Jeffrey's been in the Beach Boys world since the early '80s, so it was really nice to include them. And John came in. I had two cameos, and the string players too. I'll talk about that in a minute, which was a coup de grace thanks to Jeffrey. Uh, John came in because there's two spots there where Bruce sings, and in the first spot he says that the doctor knows it keeps you calm. Your preacher adds it to his psalms, and that preacher, by the way, is my assistant youth minister from all those years ago, and he's the one who is guilty for getting me deeper into the Beach Boys. So so this was he's retiring in June, and I wanted to make it a point to kind of pay it back because where I am today with knowing these guys and doing these things, and I just called him in December and said, hey, what do you think? I'd like to include you in a video that I'm doing. I don't think he had any idea that it would be quite like this, but he understood it was a Beach Boys project and that I would be putting him into the video. And he was very excited afterwards. He called me and he was very appreciative. And again, this was my intention from the very beginning. You know, again, once you have people who come forward and lend themselves to something so beautiful and expressive, you just want to give back. That's just my nature. And then John, many fans know, is a big Beach Boy fan himself, a major fanboy. And in fact, he's popularized the song Forever, which is a Dennis Wilson recording from the same album, Sunflower. But I think the last 30 years, people just know that as a song by Jesse and the Rippers from Full House. They don't realize it's from Sunflower and that it's a Dennis Wilson recording. So these were just kind of my nods to them. And that's actual footage from John's wedding, not a Full House episode. And you know, adding the string players, Jeffrey Foskett put me in touch with Jim Hoke, who's kind of a really I couldn't even begin to. All I can tell you is Jim played on Paul McCartney's 2018 Egypt Station album, among other things in his vast career. And the cellist that you saw was Jim's son, Austin. And the girl who was playing the violin, her name is Kristen Weber. So it's Austin Hoke and Kristen Weber who are playing the strings. And to have real strings on that arrangement was a real big deal to me. Because first of all, singing in a church choir, Christmas time, Easter, we do strings. We bring in strings to go with the anthems that we're singing. So I'm a huge fan of classical music, Mozart, and strings. And so that was beautiful to me to be able to bring them in because it just brought Brian Wilson's original arrangement kind of to life to
I
have.
was gonna say that. I feel like Brian Wilson's like arrangements of everything was very orchestrated, like from the way the vocal lines were handled to like it's just very symphonic, in how his brain worked,
Yeah.
by
Yeah,
nature.
no,
It's
no one, and all the members will tell you this. No one can touch Brian Wilson's incredible arrangement. Period. No one can touch it. Each and every one of them had told me that countless times over. They all understand. And Mike is probably the most outspoken when it comes to that subject. Mike has told me so many times, there's just no one comes close to my cousin's vocal arrangement prowess.
Did
Nobody.
you have to get Brian's approval to move forward with this project?
Well, it wasn't going to, from the very beginning, I knew we weren't going to call it the Beach Boys because, for first of all, the Beach Boys is just those members, just the adults, and I knew we couldn't. Back in 2012, when the Beach Boys did their reunion tour, the kids actually opened up for a few shows for them, and they called themselves California Saga, and we couldn't call it that because this was the kids with the parents. So we just kind of landed on California Music, and no, I invited Brian just when I invited everybody else back in April, May, June. He was invited, and at the time, and I can't surmise as to why. I mean, I can assume that maybe because of the pandemic, he didn't want to go anywhere. And you have to remember, number one, that Mike, Bruce, Al, all these guys are in their upper 70s.
Hmm.
So the idea of going out and going somewhere during a pandemic probably
Not the
was,
best
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
Brian, so at that time, Brian was just not available. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't doing any recording. And I've experienced that through the years in doing the magazine where Brian wasn't available at the time that I was trying to do an interview with him or schedule an interview. And I'd either postpone the content of what I was working on for an upcoming quarterly, or I would do the interview later and then post it online in between quarterlies, or I would just have to figure out another time or skip ahead. So I know that when Brian's not available, Brian's not available. And so I didn't press the issue. I could have, but I have come to, and this is true with all of them, and they all know this, I come to love and respect and care about them way too much to ever, once I'm told not available, I just go forward. And in respect to the pandemic and people losing jobs, I was turning on the news in the meantime and seeing lines of people lined up, for food. So the idea of postponing the project while people were in line, for food, I just thought I'm going to go forward with this. And intentionally, it's more or less a love letter to Brian. The video is a love letter to Brian. I mean, you'll notice I put his brothers in there, who are no longer with us, unfortunately. So in that one section where we're looking through the old movie camera, we get to see Dennis Wilson. And the lyrics there are perfect. At a movie, when you feel it touching your heart. Perfect. Because there's Dennis, and it segues right into Carl. And I've heard from so many people how that touched their heart and they got teary and they kind of, got emotional. And so home run as far as I'm concerned, because that was its intention, was to reach people on that more visceral level to say they're not here, but they're not forgotten. Well, I've never met Dennis, but I did meet Carl a number of times and he made an extremely impactful impression on me. And so he lives within me. His spirit, that spirit of who he was and how he treated me, lives on. And so I wanted to give that back to the fans. Again, it's a prospect. It's the ideal of giving back, of trying to give back. So yes, Brian did not participate on the recording, but this is genuinely, and I 100% means this. He knows I love him, and this is as much for Brian as it is for the fans. And because it's his bandmates, right? It's his bandmates, his children, and it's his granddaughter too. So this was really as much for Brian as it was for the world in support of Feeding America.
I love that it's for a good cause and that there's a beautiful cause tied to a beautiful cause, like that message of togetherness and coming together is, I feel like it can never be emphasized enough, especially during times like we've had this past year. So that message of hope and coming together and on top of that being tied to a cause that really actually helps people get food in their bellies is really incredible. David, you talk a lot about intention. You've mentioned the word several times. I mean, how do you so you obviously very much intended to do, put this project together and you knew what its purpose served, but on a personal level, how does living with intention, how has that served you, your happiness, your success? What does that mean to you? What does living with intention mean to you?
Oh gosh, it's a great question. Um, it means understanding that when you wake up, that you go forth in the day knowing that you have the capability, and this is true for each and every one of us, that we have the ability and the capability to go forth in the day and make others' lives better. And we all have the ability to do that. We each of us does. And um, for the Beach Boys, they do that for us through their music, through uh, the ideal of setting forth and staying true to yourself. That's another part of intention, is what is my intent? If I'm going to ask the Beach Boys and their children to do this project, it isn't just important to me to affect the world. It isn't just important to me to help feed people. It's as important to me that they know my intention. And it's not ever spoken, I mean, they again, it's because they've known me as long as they have. They understand that my heart is 100% invested. It's investing yourself completely in whatever you do. And ideally, that would mean that you're passionate about it, and what your intention is for good. Is for the good of mankind. Hopefully, that's where people come from when they're putting forth, because there's all sorts of intention. You can wake up in the morning and have intention. Is your intention good? For me, that's what it is. And the Beach Boys' music and their time with me and their energy and the number of interviews they've done with me over the years. I mean, I have to find a way to give back. I have to. It's when someone, one of the questions I get asked all the time is, what is it like to know them? And I'll share something very personal. One of the great things that has happened for me is practicing transcendental meditation.
Yeah, you had talked when we first spoke, and you had talked a lot about meditation, and I'm happy you're bringing this up because, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, it's okay. So many who know Beach Boys history will know that Mike Love went and was in Rishikesh, India with the Beatles and spent time there. But prior to that, they all had gotten their mantras. Brian and his wife at the time, Marilyn, got their mantras from a woman named Helen Lutz in Los Angeles. And the Beach Boys, though, were on tour. They played a UNICEF event on December 17th, 1967. And Maharishi sat in the front row with John Lennon and George Harrison on either side of him. And after the show, they all met him. And then Mike Love and all the Beach Boys except Dennis Wilson took off to London. And Mike Love was partying with Marlon Brando because he was at the UNICEF event. Well, the next day, the phone rings. Mike gets a phone call from Dennis Wilson. He says, "You have to come back. Maharishi's going to give us our mantras." And that to me is a significant moment in Mike's life, that Dennis is the one who made that phone call. Dennis was the one who brought them back. Dennis was the one who kind of orchestrated that whole chain of events. And it affected Mike's life so profoundly because Mike became a teacher in 72 of TM, as did Al Jardine. And they did a beautiful recording called All This Is That. Maybe that'll be my next project. And Mike, over the years of seeing me backstage in different settings, would say to me, "You should consider taking up TM." And I just didn't want to do it because a Beach Boy was telling me to do it or suggesting it. That didn't seem to be really it's like getting a gym membership because you need to lose weight, you need to go work out, but then you get the gym membership and then you never go.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to do that. And coming from a Episcopal Christian background, being in my church choir and having that faith, I was just concerned, and I didn't know enough about it as he was suggesting it. So it kind of gave me, I was kind of resisting it. And finally, I just went to a free introductory meeting in January of 2018, asked some questions in regard to the science behind it. And I learned a lot, and it hasn't affected my faith, and I don't think it will affect anyone's faith, whatever their faith may be. And it's been a very useful tool for me. Now that came by proxy of Mike Love, who, for whatever his reasons were, I think he kind of saw in me an opportunity for me to become more settled. That he thought that there would be at least a tool within the meditation practice that I might find beneficial, and that turned out to be true. When I was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroendocrine cancer in early 2019, it was very challenging for me because at the same time I had relatives. My younger brother had colon cancer for the second time while I was getting my information, and then I had another relative who was dying with a 7-inch mass on her lung.
Oh my goodness.
It was like very hard for me to kind of process
all that happening, yeah,
all of it happening at the same time, because it didn't allow for me to be available completely for my brother. That was my first thing, is I was not able to be completely available for him because I was, distracted by what my medical condition was. So, and then my operation was in fact Thursday, April 4th, of all days, 2019. And it went well, but then we had other complications. And so I ultimately ended up in the hospital for nearly 2 months. And that took a toll on me physically, of course, because of the operation, emotionally, and mentally. And while I was in the hospital, the practice of TM kind of just didn't happen. It didn't occur because I was under so much pain medicine and everything else. But I was really struggling. And then to come out on the other side in early June, I started to get back into my practice. And I get a phone call, and I'm talking to Mike. We were doing an interview. But he first, I think it was at the end of the interview, he stopped before we got off the phone. And he said, "So am I understanding it correctly that you were in the hospital for a couple of months, for a while?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he started asking me about it, legitimately concerned. So this is the man that I know. So you have the entertainer, you have this celebrity, you have this man who goes out and entertains people and brings so much joy to people worldwide, along with his other bandmates, regardless of who you're going to see. That's what they do for a living. But they are all these beautiful people. Each and every one of them are these beautiful human beings. And so Mike legitimately cared. They all legitimately cared. I heard from Brian and his wife Melinda. They were concerned. They were asking how I was doing. So there's this side of it that beyond the celebrity world, beyond the that idea of idolizing or anything like that, this human connection of this really settled and measured um, intention, and then that is how meditation has helped me. Is clearing. It's kind of like clearing the cobwebs, if you will, twice a day. Wake up and I meditate, and then usually before a big meal, closer to dinner time, I meditate again. And those 2 20-minute meditations just really help kind of, some are much busier than others, depending on what's going on in the world or what's going on in my life. But when I hit that settled moment during the meditations where it just kind of all kind of falls away, there's just so much energy regained within. And it makes it so much easier to kind of go about your intention in such a clean and coherent way that it isn't that, oh, I'm dealing with these famous people. It's, oh, I'm doing my due diligence to carry out a project that I hope will bring joy to the world. And that's the intention, that, and it's through that meditation and it's through that practice of having clear and cohesive thought and intentional thought, that because we all have great ideas, right? Every day, I think people have great ideas every day. And we could be sitting here talking about this great idea I had that never came to fruition, right? This wonderful add some music thing it was a great idea, but it just didn't happen. But it happened because they know, again, this goes back, they know that they know that I'm going to see it through. They know that I'm going to, with purity of heart, purity of consciousness, that I'm going to see it through, and bring it to fruition. And so, yeah, we saw the video, and this is the CD that's going to be coming out April 23rd. That's got not just the Add Some Music to Your Day song, but a recording from Mike, a recording from Al, a recording from Bruce, a recording from David, a recording from the kids. I call them kids. They're the
They're
kids.
adults now, right?
A recording from Jeffrey, a recording from Rob, and then the a cappella and instrumental versions of Add Some Music. Because going back to that fanboy in me, I know that there's fans out there that like to hear those things. They like to hear the finished version, but they also like to hear just the voices. And then they also like to hear just the instrumental portion of it too.
And David, where can our audience pick up this CD and so the proceeds to that's what goes to Feeding America?
Yes, so 100% of the digital single that's available now goes to Feeding America. A portion of the proceeds of this CD, once it comes out April 23rd, will go to Feeding America as well. And I think it's available on Amazon worldwide for pre-order. And I'm pretty sure that the single itself, the digital single, is available worldwide. And if you go through Amazon as one option, that you can get it and download it.
And also your book that you showed us, the coffee table book, the 50 years, is that also available on Amazon?
I'm pretty sure it is. I don't know how many are left, but I think the coffee table book is. And then this is I did want to show this too. So this is the making
the newest
of
magazine.
this is a brand new edition. I just got it Friday, so I'm in the process of mailing these out. And so it's kind of the companion piece to this CD. It's the kind of my full story on making the album, the things that happened along the way, and as you can see we watched the video, these are all mostly video shots. And I do want to note that this is Mike's daughter Haley over here, and this is Mike's daughter Amba here, and they were not in the video. It just, again, I couldn't get everybody on the song, and in the case of putting the video together, I was not able to get everyone on the video. Again, it was a timing issue, availability issue, things like that. But I was really pleased about everyone's heart. And we talked about my intention. Just think about the number of people who are on this recording and their intention. How much each and every one of them gave of their time and their energy. And I just saw I got a lovely email this morning I woke up to. Matt Jardine had sent me an email and he said, "Happy birthday, Dave." And and
Oh,
I just did an interview on with this guy. I think he's up in the Niagara Falls area. And I gave you a shout out about the video and everything. And I watched it. And Matt, too, talked about the lines of cars that people were waiting for food and how he couldn't shake the image. So, there's a real deep intention that comes from each and every one of us. That I could be the architect for this is just a privilege. It's a privilege. And I don't take it for granted. It's really, and I don't use the word honor lightly because I really genuinely love all these people equally. I think they're amazing. They're amazing folks, and I just can't say enough about them. I mean, it's nice that the world knows the Beach Boys name, and it's nice that Carney and Wendy are known through Wilson Phillips, but all of these performers on this recording are just really truly gifted and wonderful
well,
uh,
beautiful people
human
coming together and a beautiful person orchestrating it. David, I mean, thank you so much for being on our show. I unfortunately have to wrap things up, but yeah, good luck. Keep putting out all the good in the world. Keep yourself healthy. And yeah, make sure you all back home that are tuning in, you go download the CD on April 24th, or pick
April
up your
20,
own
Friday,
copy.
April 23rd.
23rd, my bad.
That's
Friday,
fine.
April 23rd. Please make sure you go and pick up your copy of the CD. This goes towards Feeding America, a good charity to definitely contribute to. And thank you, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I do want to plug the magazine. So you can find Endless
Yes.
Summer Quarterly on our pages on Facebook. But if you go to ESQUARTERLY.com, you can subscribe or you can order any one of the issues independently.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So today's theme was living with intention. On my way home from my gig Saturday night, my car began giving out just as I turned onto the main road that leads to my house. Luckily, I was able to make it home. I putted my way this morning to the mechanic and dreadfully await to hear my car's diagnosis. It's never a good sign when your check engine light goes off. And in any scenario for that matter, because if you think about it, how often do you check your own engine? Regular maintenance is a sure way to keep yourself aware and aligned with your priorities and values. Without it, it's only a matter of time till you're putting your way around life on autopilot with time slipping by and you're left questioning the meaning of what's consuming you. To live with intention is to be confronted with what isn't aligned and choosing to clean up and fine tune what it is in our lives that needs a little fixing. Our self awareness builds when we check in with ourselves and by making sure that we're able to answer the who, what, and how. Who am I? What do I want? And how can I better serve the people in my life? Intentionally living brings us purpose. It allows us to step outside of ourselves and to acknowledge what we want our lives to represent. It's what allows us to determine what it is in our day that is important to accomplish and who and what is deserving of your time. What's meaningful for you to accomplish in your daily routine should be handled with priority and love. Who and what we choose to allocate our time to speaks volumes for the people we wish to become. Efficiently allocating our time is what allows us to incorporate more of the things we love doing and to be present while we are doing them. Make time for stillness, to think, and to breathe. The overall impact small changes can make can truly amount to be something incredible and can truly change your life for the better and increase your state of happiness. So I want to leave you off and I want to ask you for you to ponder on your own today. What do you want and how can you uniquely serve as you? Thank you for tuning into our program. Afternoon Cocktail is now available on all podcasting networks. Thank you so much, David. I wish you well, and I'm happy to have you to be able to call you a friend these days. And make sure that you go download David's CD on April 23rd. And huge thank you to our show sponsors. Thank you to Rochester Woman Online, to Chris Sirriani at IT Insights, and to Bridget Hogan, Empire Realty. Thank you to our Patreon sponsors. And I hope to see you back here this Friday with actually this Wednesday. Gosh, I don't know what day it is anymore. I will see you back here this Wednesday. Thank you for tuning in.